You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. And now, let's get into today's episode. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Mr. Larry Nichols. Most people know you as Devon Energy, but excited to dive into your story and know a little bit more about you and a little bit more about your love for Oklahoma City and all of the things that you've done and continue to do. And I think we're going to have your wife on the podcast as well, because the Hall of Fame asked me, would you like to interview them together? And I said, I think in their own rights, they probably have two. They've both done amazing things, and I wouldn't want to miss stories by putting you together. So we'll do you guys separate so you can tell your story and Polly can tell her story. So I'm excited to interview your wife in a few weeks. But before we, dive into telling a little bit about kind of what you do now, let's set a little bit of context and talk about, you were born and raised in Oklahoma City. You went to Casady School, which is just up the street. Take us back there. What was Oklahoma City like in the, 50s, 60s?
50s.
50s.
Okay. I graduated in 1960 from high school. And, at that time, Britton Road was the edge of the city.
Yeah.
North of the Casady playing fields, there were just farmland. That summer between my junior and senior year, I worked for a construction crew, working on building roads and dams out at Quail Creek.
Yeah.
And I thought, why would anyone live way out here? It was way out in the middle of the country. Nothing was out there. And I thought, these real estate people are crazy. No one's going to drive way out here. And now it's in the city, and the city's grown tens of miles beyond that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool, right? Because I ran the marathon this year, and you get up and you run by Casady, and you realize how far away from downtown you are.
Yeah. And
you think I have to run another, 12, 15 miles back to Oklahoma City, but it's still in the middle of the city at that point.
It's still in the middle.
It's not way out in the sticks where it was
on the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, dating myself badly, but at that time, there were only a few movie theaters out in suburbia. Almost all the movies were downtown, so if you had a date on Saturday night and wanted to see a movie, the odds are you were going to drive downtown to do it.
Right. So in that time, then, growing up, coming back, and you were born in 42, right? So
correct.
Families, World War is still pretty, recent history coming. When you go into school, what are you thinking as, I want to go into, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you have an idea at that time when you're in Casady and graduating high school?
I had no idea at all. I don't think most people in high school do.
Yeah.
You just figuring out how you're going to get your athletic successes, your academic successes, under your belt at that time.
So you're pretty excited and pretty into athletics at that time then?
At Casady, it's so small, everyone had to be into athletics. Okay. It wasn't voluntary.
Yeah.
But you enjoyed that. That's part of school, part of high school.
So, like most kids, then you're in every single sport that they could put you in. What was the one that you really enjoyed and you excelled the most at?
Well, I wouldn't say I excelled at any of them. I was too small.
Yeah.
When you're 5'9" and playing basketball, it's you got your challenges.
Yeah. Did you play golf growing up?
A little, yes.
Okay. So, because Casady now, I think Casady practices out of Oklahoma City now, I believe.
I really don't know.
I think so, yeah.
But in that era, we had football, basketball, and soccer, and that was it.
Yeah.
You did all of them.
So doing that then through high school, do you think I'm going to go and try and be a college athlete, or do you think academic is the way for me?
No, I had no.
Okay,
no.
So it was academics then into college,
Absolutely not.
Yeah. That's so with the college thing then. What do you have an idea when you're coming to your senior year of like, hey, I think I'm going to go do this? Because you go into law, right? And eventually you go into law, but obviously you go to Princeton to do geology.
I started out in economics.
Okay.
And one summer, I got a job working for a geology professor from SMU, really a Renaissance type man. We worked out in West Texas doing field geology.
Yeah.
Fascinating guy, and I really got enamored with geology. So I went back to Princeton and changed from economics to geology, which was something of a shock to the chairman of the economic department. He said, we've lost people to history and to English, but we've never lost anyone to geology.
To rocks.
He was to rocks. I wouldn't want to say he was insulted, but he probably was.
Yeah.
How could this happen?
Yeah.
And I did that got a degree in that. And at the time, by the time I graduated, I realized no one was hiring geologists. If you started looking for a job, it was, go get your PhD and then we'll talk to you.
Yeah.
I thought, well, this is a lousy career. And I decided to go to law school.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine, he's also a geologist. He lives in New Zealand now, but we met in Wales because he's from the UK originally. And he and his wife they're both geologists, and his nickname is Dr. Rock. And phenomenal golfer, but, he's a doctor of geology, and he would tell us we're playing golf, and he would be like, look at this rock, and look at playing in the mountains, and we could not care less. But he nerded out so much, and I think it probably took his mind off how bad he was playing or how good he was playing, because he was looking at the rocks instead of where he should be in his golf ball. But
I've afflicted my family with a lot of that as we go on hikes in various places. I'm waving my arms, pointing at this and that, and explaining it to them, and they're patiently listening.
Right.
So I understand that.
What's thousands of years old, right? That's the fascinating stuff with how this rock forms and how it's
millions
coming out of the ground. And yeah, you're right. It's,
it was millions.
It's the history of the world, right?
Right.
Some of us have books to read, but you just look at the land and see the rocks and think this has been here, like you said, for millions of years.
Yeah.
So you figure out that geology then is not the profession that, it's a bit of a lousy profession because they want you to get your PhD. Why do you think I want to be a lawyer? Why did you go back to law school?
Well, I enjoyed that kind of intellectual challenge, and ended up absolutely loving the study of law.
Yeah.
It's public policy, but it's also ability to think, the ability to look at anything and force yourself to look at both sides of any issue, which is a skill a lot of our citizens would be better if we had that.
Yeah.
When you get so one-sided that you absolutely believe that my side is absolute truth and wisdom and the other side are all idiots. It's rarely that simple.
Yeah.
And yet our society now tends in that direction.
And at this time then, what is Dad's profession? Because obviously you go on later to co-found Devon with your dad. What is Dad's profession when you're going to law school?
He had a small oil and gas company.
So it's always around as you're growing up, then you're always kind of,
yes,
it's always there.
It's always been there.
Yeah.
In fact, back when I was in grade school, there was a water shortage going on, and my father drilled a water well in our backyard. And I didn't understand it was a water well, and I'm out there looking at it as they drill it, and they get down to, a couple hundred feet, and water comes out. And apparently my father comes home from work, and I go up to him and said, Dad, bad news. It's water. I don't remember that myself. I assumed we were drilling an oil well, and it was just water coming out, and I thought he'd be disappointed.
Was the city pleased by him digging a water well in his backyard?
Delighted at the time. No one cared.
It's not like it is today,
Not
right?
like it is today.
Someone's going to be showing up,
No.
throwing a piece of paper at you, telling you can't do that.
Yeah.
Even though if it's a water shortage and you're actually doing the right thing.
You're helping the water shortage.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you go on into law, then you think that is going to be, the profession for me, and you start down that path, and you become, you start working for some pretty important people at that time, right?
Yes, after law school, I got a job as law clerk to Chief Justice Earl Warren and Justice Tom Clark.
Mm-hmm.
The records show Tom Clark, and I met him 2 times, but if you're a retired justice, you get that slot is assigned to the Chief Justice.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was just a fascinating experience. It was the first day in court was when Thurgood Marshall, the first black justice, was sworn into the Supreme Court. And President Johnson was there, and all these dignitaries were there. It was quite fun.
Yeah. Do you think at that time, like, I've kind of found my place. This is for me. I want to continue to climb this ladder.
I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah.
Just watching the debate, the intellectual debate on these large public policies, and seeing what very smart people were thinking and arguing back and forth. It was very stimulating.
Are you at this time looking, still you have like a hobby in geology at this time, or you just didn't have time for it?
No,
just totally shelved it?
And then after that, I learned of a job at the Department of Justice where they had been hiring since President Kennedy one law clerk a year for a couple of years to work in the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice, and I applied for that job and got it, and ended up working for a lowly assistant attorney general who ran that office from Arizona, Bill Rehnquist.
Yeah.
Fascinating guy.
And then, so during this time then, I assume you would come back home during Thanksgivings and times, because you're not doing this in Oklahoma at the time, right? You're out of...
No, I live in Washington.
Yeah. So you would come home maybe on Thanksgiving or Christmas and have those catch-up conversations with Dad of the oil business, and does he just say to you one day, hey, I think we should do this?
No.
Okay. How does that start?
Wasn't on the topic at all.
Yeah.
He by that time had kind of sold out of the oil and gas business and had a small conglomerate. They owned interest in banks and TV stations and an oil well supply business in Libya. So it was sort of a mini conglomerate, as was attractive at the time. And he was doing his thing, and I was off doing mine.
You never thought at any of that time then that you
Not
guys
at that
would,
time.
You would kind of co-found and go into business together. How does that come about then? And what's that time like? How long do you do the law thing before?
Well, I've been at the Supreme Court a year, and then I worked at the Office of Legal Counsel, Department of Justice, for almost 3 years.
Okay.
And was ready to move on. I mean, you don't move from one of those jobs up to being a Supreme Court justice or a attorney general.
Yeah.
So I was interviewing law firms in Washington, D.C., and Philly saw my career as being working for a law firm in Washington, D.C., and occasionally perhaps getting involved in public service in D.C. And my father approached me and said he had this idea to form a new business, that he had investors in Europe that were interested in investing in the oil and gas business in the United States, and he was thinking about getting in and wanted me to come and help him because I had a law degree and a geology degree. And as he joked later, I did not know anything about accounting, so I didn't realize that this little firm he had was virtually destitute and had no money, or I'd have said no. Yeah. And I did say no originally. I asked him how much he would pay, and it was substantially less than I could make with the law firm.
Right.
And I recall, he denies it, but I recall he said, well, you're not worth that much. I said, could be, Dad, but that's what they're going to pay me.
Right, yeah.
And I finally decided to do it, and I told him 2 years. I thought 2 years of practical business experience would not hurt me, and I could, if I didn't like it, I could easily go practice law, and I'd have broadened my background. Yeah. And working with my father sounded like fun. We ended up having, as I thought we would, a great working relationship. Mm-hmm. So I said 2 years. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like it can be so nerve-wracking to go to business with your dad, right? Like if you don't have that working relationship, this could end in terrible, like you could come to argues, you're never going to see, it could be really bad, but also if you have that understanding and working relationship, it could be the best experience of your life.
I didn't think about it at the time.
Yeah.
But I realized later that there were two distinct advantages that we had in starting out. One, there was no business. He had no employees. It wasn't like you had a lot of people who've been working for the man for 30 years and some young jerk comes in as the son and takes over and is elevated above him, creating the understandable resentment. There was nobody else there. There was my father, a bookkeeper, a receptionist, and me. So there's none of that established business. We were starting a new company. And second, I had another career. You know, I was not dependent upon him for a job, nor was he obligated to hire me to get me off the streets. So there was no pressure on either of us to do this if we didn't want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a whole different thing in seeing father, son, father, daughter, mother, all those different variations work. If you have those two elements, you're off to a running start.
Yeah.
If you don't, you got a bigger challenge, not insurmountable, but a bigger challenge.
Yeah. So you said, I'm going to give you 2 years and then I'm going back to Washington?
2 years and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So I came back, got married to a girl from Oklahoma City, Polly, who I had met in Washington, D.C., although she's from my mother's hometown, and my mother and her mother went to school together. I did not know that when we started dating. I'm not sure I would have dated her if I'd known all of that.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't tell them who I was dating. No, 20-some-odd-year-old single guy in Washington reports back home who you're dating.
Yeah.
Nor did she, for that matter.
Right. Which probably helped you,
which
too.
Probably helped,
Yeah.
which helped us both.
Yeah.
And never looked back.
Yeah. So when you do say to Dad, I'm going to give you 2 years and then we'll talk about it, what do you have in your back pocket as a B plan then? Do you think because I'm marrying Polly in Oklahoma City, are you thinking I'm going to go into private law firm practice in Oklahoma City?
Go either in Oklahoma City or back in Washington.
Sure.
Go back to all the people I'm interviewing now in Washington, D.C., or since a lot of the initial work that we were doing with Devon was legal work, half my time was spent on legal work, not on really the business side of it. 2 years, 3 years, go work for a law firm somewhere.
Yeah.
And I might add, having different skill sets also helps in that kind of relationship. He had an accounting and finance and banking. I had law and geology. So we had complementary skill sets and backgrounds.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than having the same background and you arguing about how to do it this way or my way or your way when you come to the same answer.
Right.
Yeah. So those 2 years then obviously went pretty well, and you guys had kind of a unique financing situation of we don't have any company right now, but we're going to Europe to get investors because we think that the business is going to be in the US and people are going to want to invest in the US rather than all of the big companies sending people the opposite direction. And seemed to just timing and a great idea seemed to hit the nail on the head. And
he had a lot of investors in Europe met a lot of people through some of his other businesses that wanted to invest in the oil and gas business in the U.S. as a hedge against inflation. In some countries, to get capital out of their country because there were currency controls and they needed to get capital out of their country. But they didn't want to invest in wildcat drilling. They just wanted a safe, secure investment. They wanted to buy producing oil and gas properties. And so that's what we did.
Yeah. So the idea then is, like I said, you're gonna get this fund, and then off you go, and you just start buying up small businesses that are producing.
We bought small assets here and there.
Yeah.
In September of 1971, we bought an interest in 5 wells in Texas. We were not the operator, but we owned 5 wells, and we were off and running. Spent most of the year raising a paltry amount of money by today's standards. And of course, today, equity funds and all the private financing did not exist then.
Yeah, and to that point, right? You see the funds that are rolling around today, and the amount of money today. You just think it's absurd, right? It's so much money.
Where were you when I needed you?
Right. Yeah, because that's a nerve-wracking time, right? You know, you have these businesses and you're doing research and you're finding the businesses that are in the country that you want to go buy, and then you've got to report back and say, hey, we've got these businesses, get this money in. But that business might have, like, you were kind of racing against the clock, I assume, at that time as well.
Yeah, no,
right?
it was a race against the clock, and we would, you know, buy a small little group of assets and gradually get bigger, and started buying small companies, companies that people had aged and wanted to retire and didn't have anyone to run it. You know, looking for those opportunities, and over time.
When does it hit you that you're not just kind of starting a business with your dad, and obviously you've given him more than 2 years, but this is a point where I love this. This has given me the bug. Like you get that fizz to go to work every day. Like, when does that come in?
I actually never really remember sitting back and saying, okay, I'm at the 2 years or whatever I told my dad. Let's think about it today.
Yeah.
It was always focused on, well, here's the next plateau. Here's what we can do. Here's an opportunity. Just focused on
that
so
it's very
plan.
Short-term goals that got you to the end goal of just growing it as big as you
I sometimes get asked, you know, what was your vision when you first started? The vision was to make enough money to pay your payroll,
right, and
to take a small step upward.
Yeah.
You know, how do I survive? How do I, you know, grow from where we are? It wasn't any grandiose vision of creating anything of noteworthy. It's just, how can you get to the next plateau?
Yeah. So when does that, like, time come then when you are, you know, we don't have to worry about paying the employees to, wow, we're a business now, the investors are happy? Because that's the hard part about having investors, right? Is you've got to give them a return. They're giving you all this money and they're down, you know, they're on the phones, or they're sending you letters, like, where's our return? And that, you know, that's...
We kept doing that, and, you know, things worked out the way we'd forecast, and it just gradually grew.
Mm-hmm. Do people, do bigger businesses start kind of getting onto your idea and start copying and bringing business back to the States?
Not then. We were too small to be noticed. Of course, one of the turning points was in 79 and 78, 79, and 80, in that period, when during the various Arab embargoes, when the price of oil just shot up. And a ridiculous amount of money flowed into, in that 78 through 82 period, a lot of money flowed in. There was euphoria that I've never come anywhere close to experiencing in Oklahoma, in the Southwest, where oil was the hottest thing going, and a lot of people were engaging in excessive behavior, leveraging up to the hilt. One of the luckiest thing, there was a moment that I remember going to to a bank across the street, and ran into an old high school friend. And this was someone who was a great guy. You'd love to go beer with him on Saturday night, but not anyone you'd invest with. I mean, he had gone through a bunch of businesses, and he was just walking out of the bank and had borrowed a couple $1 million to go buy drilling rigs. He knew nothing about drilling rigs. And I thought, why would a bank lend this guy real money to go buy drilling rigs, a business he knows nothing about? The euphoria was out of I thought, this is crazy. And we started selling assets and paid down our debt. There was a time when we had bought some properties that included some properties in western Oklahoma, which was the hottest area in the country at the time. And we had paid a couple $1 million for these. And on a per acre basis, $179 an acre. And people were coming in, one group came in and offered us $5,100 and some odd dollars per acre, plus half the profits on each well. And I thought, this is crazy.
This is nuts.
You know, we're doing this. We had the only contentious board meeting we've ever had in Devon's history, because two of our directors from New York arrived, and they have read this article in Forbes magazine that goes through how all of the major companies got started in one place or another. And this is the field that made them big. And then it concludes with a little conversation about western Oklahoma, the deep Anadarko. And they say there's some major companies in the making in the deep Anadarko. And they arrive, and the first thing I have on the agenda is to sell everything we have.
The total opposite.
So we had this debate. And I said, but if it works, no one knows it works yet.
Yeah.
But if it works, we get half the profits for free, risk-free. How do you turn that down? So we took all those offers. There are 7 or 8 companies that we sold to. I think all of them, or all but one of them, went bankrupt in due course. Yeah. We sat there with no debt. So when the industry crushed in the 82, 3, and 4, and this whole part of the world went through a deep depression, a terrible depression, we sat there with no debt.
And went on the offensive then, right?
And started going on the offensive.
Yeah.
Started looking for things to buy.
Yeah, which is where the real growth happens then.
Yes.
Right? It's because you're buying things for super cheap and then they start producing and...
Yeah. Now, most people at the time didn't think that.
Of course, yeah.
You know, but that's a good time to buy.
Yeah. Well, then you also have the land value too.
Sure.
Right? Which is, I mean, land value is great. It's
Well, you're just buying the mineral interest. You're not buying the
Gotcha.
surface land.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's pretty, I guess Dad's accounting rubbed off on you at that time, right? Like,
I learned.
Learned a little bit at that time to
I learned.
Because it must have been so easy to just get caught up in, wow, this is the greatest time ever, you know, where everyone should be in the oil business, we've got all these things, maybe we should be buying as well, and you're like, no, let's keep a level head, let's clear our debts.
And when Penn Square happened, which was the big signature bankruptcy, it didn't bother us.
Yeah. Great. Like when you look back and you think that's such a defining moment in the business, right?
It was.
To have that decision, have the board members there and have that, you know, it's probably spirited discussion of, you know, we should not be buying stuff right now. We need to.
And to be willing, have the strength of your own convictions to do a very contrarian thing. Mm-hmm. You know, to sell something when everyone else coveted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I see kind of just around, and I know you guys kind of talk about it quite a lot, is just innovation as well. And the innovation that you got a couple of great videos on the website, the innovation of when you were down with and forgive me, I know very little about this business, but the San Juan Basin and the natural gas and the innovation of the wells that you guys did there and that breakthrough with the natural gas side. When does that come in?
Yeah, that comes in the mid-'80s.
Okay.
We realized that there has to be a consolidation in our industry. Mm-hmm. At that time, there were 400 publicly traded oil and gas companies. No industry that I've ever heard of has 400 publicly traded entities, airlines, banks. I mean, it doesn't exist. And all of this huge numbers had been created by the euphoria and the ridiculous amount of money that had plunged into the industry. And because of the bust, because of the debt, because of changes in tax laws in the 1986 Tax Reform Act, that financing that had fueled the industry was gone. Mm-hmm. Banks were no longer lending. All the sources of financing were gone. And we sat there with no debt. And while other companies had lots of expertise in drilling, very few had expertise in acquisitions. Mm-hmm. That was really what we'd done. We'd done some drilling, but mainly acquisitions. And I thought, what an opportunity. And looked at all the majors at the time. They were going international. Everything, conventional wisdom was everything in the United States that's worth discovering has been discovered. And if by chance any of these small little pesky independents discover anything of noteworthiness, they have to come to us, the majors, because only we have the financial expertise, the acumen to develop that asset, and we'll take it over. And I thought, well, that leaves a big open ground for someone to come in and consolidate all these companies and grow in the United States and look for opportunities in the United States, which is why we went public in 1988. And about the same time, we looked at the San Juan Basin, where my father had discovered wells in the 1950s, but they discovered them at a formation at 5,000 feet, and in a formation at 3,000 feet, they'd encountered huge pressures, but only water came out. And a couple of geologists and engineers started wondering, for a lot of reasons that I won't get into, if you got rid of that water, is there gas hidden behind there? And we and a few other companies started experimenting around that. And we weren't the first, but we weren't the last either. Realized that if you produce that water for a couple of months, we later got better at it and shortened that, then there were significant gas reserves.
Yeah.
And we started acquiring all that. And that was sort of a second eye-opening event for me, because I would see opportunities in the San Juan Basin at the same time that one of the major players there, Amoco, would see the same opportunity. But by the time the Amoco people had sent the message to Denver, which had sent it to Chicago where they were headquartered, and it came back, I'd already called my father, we'd agreed on it, and we'd done the deal.
Yeah.
And I thought, the majors can squash us internationally, but here in this little tract of land, we can outcompete with them just because we're faster.
Just speed, right?
We're speed. We're not blinded by it's always been this way. We don't know how it's always been. And, this might work. So we weren't blinded by, having been in business in this basin for 40 years, we know that doesn't work. I've been in business here for a year. Maybe it will work.
And we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Well, and that's the great thing about being smaller than the larger companies, right? Is because you can move fast, but also if you do have that failure, and I'm sure you've had many failures over your career, you can easily pivot and go again and try somewhere else. Like you're not running up the food chain, waiting for a decision, and then it doesn't work out, and then you've got to wait for that period again, and it's. You're getting over your failures a lot quicker than the other bigger companies are as well.
Yeah, and you do have failures.
Yeah.
I try to forget those.
Right.
Generally have. But because of that, we were the leading, the best performer our first year as a public company, the best performer on the American Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Which is where all the public small independents were at that time.
What's it like going public? Is it quite a nerve-wracking thing to go public, and you're out there and you're on the stock exchange and people can buy shares in you? I mean, what is that experience like? Not
as bad as it is for some companies, because we were not really the classic family-owned business. We had lots of investors. We started out with lots of outside investors. So reporting to outside investors
was normal for you guys.
Was normal. It's how we started.
Yeah.
It wasn't just our own little family and family capital.
Yeah.
We were using third-party money a lot. And early on, just looking at it from my legal side kicked in, and I realized let's have good corporate governance. And so we looked at what the rules were in terms of corporate governance for the New York Stock Exchange and adopted those just because they made good business sense.
Do you treat yourself at that time? Do you think, over the years of you're working hard, and this is probably a breakthrough. You've done this. The company's gone public. Do you think I'm going to treat myself? I deserve something.
Absolutely not.
Dad wouldn't let you.
Absolutely not. There's always. At the time we went public, of those 400 companies, we were like 252nd or something number like that in size. And I'm using 1988 dollars.
Sure.
We were like a $70 million market cap company. And Wall Street and our investment bankers said, if you get to 200 million, you'll really have arrived. You'll really have a position there with the rest of them. And of course, we kept growing, and that number kept growing.
Yeah, and as of today, I think we're in the billions.
Yeah.
I think it's mad. But so life really doesn't change that much for you then when you guys go public. It's just...
No, we go public because if we're public and have public shares, it's easier to continue the consolidation.
Gotcha.
We go public not as the end of the goal, but as a means to do what we really want to do.
To further
which is
mission,
continue the growth and do the consolidation and have, by this time, thinking in terms of vision. The vision was there have to be a handful of small independents that get really good and efficient in the oil and gas business inside the United States.
Yeah. And the
majors aren't here. There's a gap. No reason we can't be one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and back to the early idea of bringing things back here, that's just kind of reinforcing that idea because you are growing, and then people start to, like I said, return and
right.
Like we are one of the first movers in this, and because we've been at it starting from nothing, you just start to buy bigger businesses, I guess, at that point.
Yep.
And you just scale it from there.
Yep.
Which is, it's a simple model to follow, but obviously, you need the money to do that, right?
Yes.
You need to keep growing and have people who believe in you, especially after the 80s and the bust. That's probably a tough period to go through too, with people that don't want to believe in oil anymore. They want to go do something else.
And some people want to cash out.
Sure.
But other people will say, I'm ready to retire.
Yeah.
I'll use that as an example. But I don't want to sell out of the oil and gas business. I want someone to run it. And I don't have anyone who run it, but I want to participate because I think you're going to do well. I don't want cash from you, Devon. I want stock.
Yeah.
We'll merge our businesses together, but I want to be a player. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have public stock, you can't.
Yeah. So it really helped you guys then a lot.
That's why we went public.
Yeah, amazing. So at this time then, you were in your mid-40s going on? Yeah, mid-40s. And most people, if you look at just people over their careers, mid-40s is generally when people hit their stride. And you're just fired up. You're in Oklahoma City. You're growing the business. And you have a family at this point too?
Yes, oh yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that. Tell me about your family and your kids.
By this time they're in high school. We're going.
Oh, so you had kids early then?
Well, I got married when I was 29.
Yeah.
My wife was 27.
Okay.
So we got our kids in the early 30s.
Gotcha.
They were going back to the Depression in the in western part of the United States in the 80s, early 80s. At that time when everyone was going bankrupt. And it was that conversation around the table was always, you hear someone's having trouble, someone's going to sell and move out of town where they can get a job. And it was just sort of a daily bombardment. And we had 2 grade school kids there listening to it all. And one day I'm sitting in the living room and my son and daughter are around in one of the bedrooms and I can hear them talking. And they have a picture of USA Today. And it has on the sports page the top paid player, and Sally's saying, Tyler, here's a pitcher who makes $1 million. I've forgotten what the number is. He makes $1 million, and it was probably 100,000 then, but whatever. And here's a shortstop. What's the shortstop? And then there's this pause. Tyler, can Dad play baseball? Very much worried about, he's in this business where everyone's going broke. We kids got to look out for ourselves.
And kids are brutally honest, right?
Oh, they are.
They don't know any.
They don't know anything better, except everyone Dad and Mom knows are going broke, and particularly those in the oil and gas business.
Especially at a high school age where they're really aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not like they're toddlers and they're blissfully unaware. Like they are fully aware of the situation.
They're fully aware, and listening when you don't think they are.
Yeah.
So no, they are in college, and I'm off running around.
Yeah. You probably had some great conversations coming home from work then with, what have you done today? Do you still have a job tomorrow? Right?
Are you happy?
Are you happy? Can you pitch? Brilliant. I love that. Back to the school days, like, no, I'm not athletic. I can't do that. We're not going to go pitching. I might go back to law school. Go back to be a lawyer. So it seems like through the 90s, it's much of the same. You're acquiring businesses. Devon is growing. And then you come to 2001, you get a phone call from the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, and they're inducting you in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in 2001. Did you feel like you'd arrived at that point? Was it a shock?
I was shocked. I felt, and I've heard others say the same thing, well, that's nice, but only old people get that. I'm much too young to get that.
You were 49 at the time, right?
I don't know. Yeah. Do you know how old I was?
59.
Yeah.
Right, 42.
Whenever it was, you're always much too old.
I think I'm terrible at math, but I'd assume 59. Yeah.
I've really forgotten, but that was my.
Yeah.
You have simultaneous reactions. One, you're of course flattered and honored. You're embarrassed because you don't really deserve it, and you're thinking, I'm not old enough to get this. Only old people get this.
Right.
God, I'm maybe getting old.
Maybe I should retire. Well, who introduced you that day? When you got when you're on stage, and who introduced you as, was it the same back then as it is today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. a person who was the chairman of Baker Hughes, a company that I was on the board of. I'd asked Bill Rehnquist, the Chief Justice, then the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but it was in the middle of the court session and he couldn't do it.
Do you ever have times then when the business is growing and you're doing this and you're going public and you think, you're in touch with all your friends who are probably still doing, you might be in DC or they're in the law, maybe they have their own law practices. Do you ever think that I do miss the law thing a little bit?
I would have enjoyed that, but I never had any regrets at all for doing what I do.
Yeah. And I mean, it worked out great, obviously.
It worked out fine.
Yeah. So 2001, you get inducted into Oklahoma Hall of Fame.
It worked out great, not only from financial and success standpoint, but to have the opportunity to help Oklahoma City grow.
Yeah.
Which, if you're in Washington, D.C., no way.
Yeah.
No chance of that. But to be able to have established a company that can be a meaningful aid to and make Oklahoma City grow, there's a lot of satisfaction in that.
Where were you guys based at that time in Oklahoma City?
We've always been downtown.
Okay. So one of the buildings before you built, this.
We started out in what is now today Bank First Tower. It was Liberty Tower at the time. And then we went across the street to what then was Mid-America Tower. We later named it Devon when we filled it up. And it was now occupied by Continental. And at that time, because of our growth, we not filled up we had all that we could get of Mid-America Tower, and we had floors scattered all over downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, we had people, every building in downtown almost. We were in 6 different buildings and scattered around, highly inefficient. I think people spent half their time walking around downtown going from one building to the other.
Yeah.
We kept saying, we have to build a new building. It's the only way. And I kept putting it off because that's going to take a lot of time and effort. And there was always another opportunity in the oil and gas business that was much more interesting.
Yeah. So on to that point then, with the growth of Oklahoma City, and you mentioned earlier, you always get asked, did you have a vision and not for the business? But did you have a vision for the growth of Oklahoma City and how you could impact that?
Evolving. It really, when we started thinking about where we would build a building, there were a lot of people who had suburban land they wanted us to build on. And I realized that if we took our several thousand employees out of downtown, it would have a significant negative impact. Those people would not be banking there. They would not be buying their clothes there. They would not be having lunch and breakfast and dinner there. They would not be spending money downtown, and that would have a negative impact. I also, as I had traveled around being CEO of a public company, I've never found a dynamic city that does not have a dynamic downtown. It doesn't work that way. Maybe there's one somewhere, but I haven't seen it. So I thought, and I saw some of the companies in Houston where their workforce was isolated out on the suburbs and surrounded by a barbed wire fence, and that's not very welcoming. So we decided early on we wanted a building in the middle of downtown.
Yeah. When do you start that process then? When do you think, okay, we're going to do this, let's figure out, and because it's a mighty decision to make, right? And it's not an easy process.
We started interviewing architects.
Okay.
And quickly realized there are only there are only less than 10 architectural firms that really build high-rise buildings. And we know just because of the sheer math, we have enough employees that it's got to be a building of some size to house our employees. And I was not eager to jump into this, but as I would travel, so I'm going to Chicago, I would ask some architectural firm, have you built anything in Chicago? Tell me where it is, and I'll take an extra day. And while I'm up there on Devon business, oil and gas work, meeting with investors, I'll stop by and look at the building. And sometimes they would join me or have a colleague of theirs join me, and we'd look at various buildings and see what worked and what didn't work. And I didn't have the trained eye. You could walk in some buildings and say, this really doesn't feel good. And they'd say, well, why doesn't it feel good? I don't know. It just does feel kind of cold and sterile. And would learn another type of building works better. So it was very much of a learning experience over a year or so as I kicked the can down the road, trying to avoid it.
Yeah. But you settle on John Pickard as the architect, and that process just starts, and you think,
yeah, I mean, after there were some of the larger architectural firms that very much had the attitude, we're building these buildings in Shanghai and in Dubai, and where's yours, Oklahoma City? Yeah, maybe we can fit you in. That had what I viewed as a rather snotty attitude.
Right.
And I scratched them off my list. They go do what they want to do, but if they're not going to have interest in it, then I want someone who does.
Yeah.
And sort of narrowed it down. And there were several that we could have chosen and been happy with.
Sure.
But we chose Pickard Chiltern and never had a regret.
So when you start seeing the models, you start seeing the plans, and you see the scale of this tower that you're going to build, and it's got your name on it in Oklahoma City, what are you feeling at that time? How are these conversations going? And for you personally, from a city that you've grown up in, to have a building that is basically the statement piece to this city, what are those conversations like, and how is that process?
I never focused on the size that much. The height. We wanted a building that was not just another square building with a flat roof. I mean, there are hundreds, thousands of those. You want something that was beautiful. And fortunately, we were doing this at a time when there was a serious recession in building. In fact, when we started our tower, we were the only high rise in the country coming out of the ground, which said we had all the kinds of buying power in buying glass windows and furniture, because all of those companies were desperate for work. And we were the only live wire in the country that was out getting jobs. So we had the opportunity to really build a high-class building with some architectural interest without busting the budget.
How are you with heights? Are you up there with the architects during the phases, walking through in your hard hat, or are you staying on the ground as far away from it as possible?
Well, neither. I have been up there. But by that time it is the design work is the where you look at different models and have fun with different models. And see what works. You don't want something that is outlandish and is not efficient. And I remember it was easy for me to tell the architects what I didn't want. And I've been in buildings where they're big buildings and they have a long hallway that extends in a straight line forever. And it feels not unlike a prison. I mean,
it's like a hotel.
It feels like a hotel. There's no interest in that at all. So it's, we got to do something. Want light in everywhere. There are corners of our building that don't have executive offices that have windows that everybody can see. Looked at corporate cafeterias, corporate dining rooms, generally down in the basement. No one wants that. So I said we wanted a dining facility for our employees that is open to the public. We don't want to be a standoffish, you can't come in here attitude. Doors on all four sides, open to the public. Dining facility open to the public with lots of glass.
What is the other thing too? What is that when you walk into the building and you standing on that circle? I forget the name of it, and you speak and you hear all those echoes back.
Oh, the rotunda?
It's the greatest thing ever. That just naturally, or did you think, I want that in my building?
No, that came to solve a problem.
Okay.
We had the tower. There are a variety of facilities that are not appropriate in a tower that need more space. The computers need more space. The dining facility needs more space. A big room to do gas marketing needs a wider footprint on the floor. And so we were going to build another building and then a building for security and personnel. So we really have three buildings. One building that our garden wing is really the size of it used to be the Kerr McGee building, but it's on his ground, so it gets no respect at all. So we needed to figure out a way to connect these buildings, but still maintain security.
Yeah.
And the rotunda sort of serves that as an example. It is open to the public, and you think it's a public space, but there's walkways on the second and third and fourth floors that connect all of our various buildings. So people can walk through that and energize that during the day without going in and out of security all the time.
Yeah. The first time, me being a golfer, the first time I saw it finished, the first thought I had was I would love to hit a golf ball off the top. Like just stand there, not going out to the park, just, put it, just me being a golfer and an immature man would think that I would love to hit a golf ball off the top of that. And maybe one day I will, who knows?
Who knows?
But obviously recently we had some guy climbing it. I mean, that's mad. I know he's a professional, but that's nuts. What are you like watching this on the news thinking, I wouldn't climb that if I had full harnesses and a million safety gear? Like, that was crazy.
Incredulous.
Mad, right?
Total incredulous.
Yeah.
But if you watch him, he was calm.
Yeah, really calm.
A wiry guy that is very agile, and he just scampered up that thing.
I couldn't believe it.
No.
I was, and I obviously get why he did it. He's trying to raise awareness, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, obviously a professional, and professional. Clearly, he does this a lot. So I couldn't believe it. And the other thing you mentioned too, which I didn't think of until now, is security. Obviously, this is especially after 9/11 and all the other stuff that goes on. And as much of an impact I think as the Air Force Base in Oklahoma has on the center of this country, people don't really think about security that often. But when you put a building at that scale and a statement piece in the middle of this country, that's probably one of the top priorities is security as well.
Security is.
Yeah.
And they're quiet and unobtrusive, but there's security features all over that. Mm-hmm. Of course, the main reason you build a building is to house your employees.
Yeah.
And it's not to win awards or to make statements. It's a recruiting tool.
Yeah.
And if you're graduating from college and have a choice in working in a nice building in a nice environment or working in a dull building, all things being equal, that building can make a difference. In fact, after we built that, we went for almost a year and a half where everyone we made an offer to who had come to the building decided to accept our offer.
Yeah, it's a quite good sell when you show them their office view, right? Which at the time was nothing. Now it's incredible because you have the park and everything. At the time it was just parking lots and the river,
right? Which
still serves as it's a nicer view than most people.
And to me, the greatest success of that building was one Saturday after we'd moved everyone in. Perfectly beautiful day, a good day to go play golf or garden or watch football game or do whatever you do on a beautiful Saturday. We had a lot of employees. I was coming downtown to catch up on some work Saturday morning, and there were lots of employees down there who would come down on a perfectly nice Saturday to show their parents, to show their spouse, little kids in tow, grandmother and granddad in tow, in a wheelchair, showing them where they got to work. That says it all.
Yeah, that means a lot, doesn't it? To see people coming on their day off to show their parents, hey, I work at that building right there.
To take your day off, to get your whole family to come downtown to show you where I work.
Yeah.
That says the building's a success. And that's who you ultimately build it for.
Right.
Mainly.
Yeah. Yeah, because as a business, it works efficiently when everyone's in the same building. And if you got to go to another floor, you jump in the elevator and off you go. You don't have to walk 2 miles across town.
Right. Because we've done that.
In the middle of Oklahoma winter, which is freezing.
Or heat. Or wind. Yeah. Take your pick.
Yeah. It's awesome. And I'm sure, every time you probably see a photo of it, right? Or you see the sunset reflecting off it. Or we're at a Thunder game and you look out and it says Thunder Up down the side of the building. Like, so many little things that...
Well, if you had 2 towers, we debated having, shopping the building, having 2 towers.
Yeah.
You have inefficiencies there.
Right.
Because you have to go down, cross over, come back up, in and out of security. There are lots of 2 buildings of the same square footage cost more than 1 building.
Yeah. And like back to recruiting, right? If you had two buildings, nobody would be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
are you in A or B? It doesn't matter, does it? But when you have, and obviously the restaurant at the top too, it's not just for employees, right? You have the restaurant right up top. Vast is doing great, and Kurt's doing a great job. Great chef, and it was it 10 years we just passed.
10 years.
It was last weekend,
right?
Which is incredible. And I know Kurt is also he loves his golf too, which I found that out recently. But fantastic chef, and for you looking over the last 20 years and 10 years of Vast, it must be great to see the growth of Oklahoma City with maps, everything that's happened with that, the parks, the Thunder, and the movie studios now. I mean, you probably didn't even think it would get anywhere close to what it is now back in the day.
I remember when I first came back to Oklahoma City in 1971, 72, my father and some of his colleagues were having lunch, and I was with them. And they were looking across to the Presbyterian Hospital. And in between, this is before the expressway was built, there was nothing between downtown and this one lone hospital out there except a big slum. And I remember one of them saying to my father, John, someday this is all going to get filled in. The two will grow together. And I looked at that and said, these guys are crazy. They're absolutely crazy. And I think about that now when I look at our building and look at the river and all the vacant lots and all the red dirt between downtown and the river, and hear someone say, this is all going to get filled in time. They're right.
Yeah.
They're right.
Yeah. Start buying land on the outside of town now and it'll be worth a lot of money in 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah. Because even the outside cities now, Edmond and Oklahoma City, they just joined together. Same with Oklahoma City and Yukon and all these other surrounding cities to the south as well. And it's amazing to see. I'm sure, you're extremely proud of the impact that you've had through the company, your employees' impact, and everybody else that, you wouldn't be able to do this without the whole team that you have. And
absolutely.
It's huge.
Nothing happens without a lot of smart people.
Yeah. Moving on to some, personal little fun stuff we can talk about. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have something you do every morning? You have this is my routine, or are you pretty just straightforward?
Pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
Get up, shower, shave, have breakfast, go to work. Pretty dull, all-American.
Is there anything you do every day without fail?
No.
No? Every day's different?
Yeah.
Are you reading anything right now? You a big reader?
I'm trying to catch up on a lot of things. There's, I thought when I retired I'd have a lot more free time than I do, but there are a lot of civic projects, other projects that kind of fill your time up.
Yeah. So after retirement then, what did you just dive into the civic side and think, I'm going to really...
I still hang around at Devon.
Well, of course. Yeah.
But there are projects here you get asked to do. I was chairman of the search committee to hire the replacement for Roy Williams at the Oklahoma City Chamber. I've been on a variety of search groups, working as chairman of Myriad Gardens and at Scissortail, a sister organization, to grow those quietly behind the scene, which is great. There are a lot of things to occupy your time.
It's we're not done growing, right? There's so much to do, and even the south side of the park now, across the river's opened up, and I think last year, the marathon route went that way for a little bit, and I think it's going to go that way again next year. It's and then you have the hotel and everything. It's incredible, right? I'm sure you looked out of your office at some point and just saw the Thunder Arena and a Cox Communications Center that was not great, and a hockey team that didn't want to be there, and a bunch of parking lots, to now we've got developments coming on the river, and the river...
Yeah, if you put that in historical context, the Concord Hotel, at the time it was built, in 1910 or so, it was the highest building in the state of Oklahoma, and the Civic Fathers had a big celebration at the top of that building where they look over growing Oklahoma City of 15,000 people and congratulate themselves on the little town they're building.
It's amazing.
That's, slightly over 100 years, but not a lot.
Yeah. When you do all this, then, all this civic stuff, and you give back, you meet all these people. What gives you hope for the future during this time?
Oh, they're all the young people. Everyone. Oklahoma City has a great culture. You can look at the fairly unique, not good use of the word unique, but darn near unique, relationship we have between the business community and city government, working cooperatively together. In the early days, Oklahoma City Chamber would go visit other cities once a year to see what worked and what they were doing right. No one ever came in the 70s and 80s. No one ever came to visit us, and now they do. And when they do come to visit us, they're amazed that the mayor, has an honorary position, a seat at the table in the city chamber. In a lot of cities, business and the city government war with each other. We're not big enough to do that. We figured that out when Ron Norick started the MAPS programs. We got to work together to make this thing grow, or life's going to pass us by.
Yeah. Is there anything that scares you or keeps you up at night?
Nothing keeps me up at night, but the level of cooperation, the feeling that all serious businesses need to be represented in playing a role in one way or another in the chamber or in some other way, the ability to unite the community. And when Clay Bennett started the Thunder, he could quickly get all the leaders in business and government together quickly to make a decision and to support bringing the Thunder here. That wouldn't happen in a lot of cities. Yeah. What's in it for me? I don't want to do that. That wouldn't happen in most cities. And hopefully that attitude never goes away, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah. There's
no guarantee.
Are you, to the point of the Thunder, do you go to a lot of games? Are you a big fan of Thunder basketball?
Oh, you have to.
Yeah. I was at the game on Tuesday, and it was, we won, which was great.
Right.
But it's Sam Anderson once joked at me. He wrote the book Boomtown, and I told him, he asked me if I was big in basketball, and I said, well, I got here in August 2011, and when Thunder were in the playoffs, and I missed that. And he goes, so what you're telling me is you're glad that Westbrook got hurt because you weren't a real fan when we could have won the playoffs. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. My short time here, I got to see a little bit of, the great team that we had, and now it's a building phase. And, Sam Presti's genius through this whole time he knows what he's doing.
He does.
That's all that matters, which is great. The other thing that's coming up is Thanksgiving. You a big fan of Thanksgiving in the kitchen, or do you leave it to Polly?
I pretty well take care of the other stuff.
Yeah?
No, Thanksgiving's a great holiday. All holidays are great.
True.
Christmas, July the 4th.
Do you have any favorites for Thanksgiving? Are you a dessert guy? Are you just a couple of plates? What's your favorite?
Turkey dressing and gravy.
Turkey dressing and
cranberry
gravy.
sauce, throw that in.
Definitely cranberry sauce. Another funny story of coming from the UK, and you might have known this from traveling, is, brown gravy is our gravy back home, mm-hmm. right? And I came here for the first time, had dinner, and someone said, "What would you like?" I'd like chicken fried steak or something, because I thought it was actually steak, and all the rest, all the other stuff that go with it. And she said, "Do you want gravy?" I was like, "Yeah, I love gravy." And he comes out with this white stuff. I was like, "What is that?" I've never had white gravy before in my entire life. I just got off the plane and having dinner, first week here. I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this place. And I'm still here. So, yeah. And then I got, welcomed to Thanksgiving by my host family. And what a great holiday that is. Yeah. It's so much fun. And fell in love with football as well, which wasn't a sport I grew up watching. But it's, this city is incredible, and the impact that you and other leaders like Clay, like you said, it's the footprint that such a small city in the general sense of this nation, the amount of power it has in such a small place. And I don't mean power as the sense of look at me, I can all this power. I mean just we have a force here of people who are doing great things for the city, and people like yourself and Clay and others, Aubrey and all of these amazing people, they all love this city, and it shows with the impact that we have and the buildings that are coming out of the ground and the parks that we have. And it's, you know, when you look back and you're playing basketball at Casady, you probably thought, I want to be as far away from this place as possible. I'm going to be a lawyer in D.C. somewhere.
Very much so.
Right?
Very much so. I mean, you can see the difference. In 1999, we bought Pennzoil, the oil and gas. At that time, it was all oil and gas. 1999, we had an incredible difficulty moving about 250 people from Houston up here because there weren't enough people here that we could hire. We had to move 250 people from Houston up here. And finally did something I've never heard anyone do. We gave every one of them I forget whether it was a 2 or a 3 year contract that said, if any time during the next 2 or 3 years you don't like Devon or we don't like you and you leave, we will pay, no questions asked, to move you back to Houston at our expense. Because they would say, if I don't like it, I'm stuck in Oklahoma City. I moved my family up here. Yeah. The jobs are all in Houston. How am I going to get back? And so we said, we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll bite the bullet. Only 3 of them ever took me up on that offer. Yeah. And they were all 3 who had a high school student, a junior in high school. And junior wasn't happy, and therefore his or her mom wasn't happy, and they wanted to move back to Houston. By that time, we had an office in Houston. They all went to work. All 3 went to work for us in Houston. So it wasn't Devon.
Right.
It was family. But it took backflips to get them to move. Fast forward 10 years after that, we had another event that happened. This time we were getting out of the Gulf of Mexico and closing our Houston office and moving them back to Houston. And I went down and had a town hall where that morning said, we have about 100 openings in Oklahoma City. If any of you want to come, please do. By the time I got back, we had 100 people almost 195, who talked to their spouse, were ready to move. Radically different. And that was in part they gotten to know Devon, but mainly they'd been up here at Oklahoma City. Maps had taken off and was growing. There were other companies here, and they were willing to move up here.
Yeah.
And make that decision in a day. In 10 years, that's a big change.
It's huge.
It's a huge change.
Yeah, and it's only going to get better.
And it had nothing to do with us. It was entirely the city.
Right.
Was a place I want to live there.
Yeah. Great food, great restaurants.
Whatever you want.
Just beer is good, microbreweries, sports teams, schools getting better. It's
whatever you want.
Yeah.
On the
golf
list.
Golf
courses.
Yeah. Good football.
Whatever arts agencies you like.
Yeah.
The city had grown into being a real city.
So you mentioned arts agencies. You big into the arts as well?
Mm-hmm.
Big fan. Were you just a fan of arts growing up, or was this something that's kind of just evolved over the year?
Evolved.
Yeah.
And even, I view it as a civic. There's certain things. I don't care whether you like the symphony or the ballet or the art museums or go down the list.
Yeah.
If you're a company of any size, you really ought to support all of them, whether you like them or not.
Yeah.
Because someone in you have employees that do, which is why we've always encouraged our employees to be active.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma City is an inviting place in that area. I sometimes get asked, I really would like to get involved in X. How do I do it? The answer's simple. Just show up. I'll call the person who runs it, but you don't need that. Just show up and say, I'm interested.
Yeah.
And have the time and the interest and would like to help.
To the point of being active, what was that? Tell me about the time that Mike Knopp came to you and said, hey, I'm building a river sports thing. I'd love to Devon to have a boathouse on the river. What was that? You think, what, in that mud pit down there? Tell me about that, because Mike's from the law background.
Yes.
He was DA, I think, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I have this crazy idea. I used to coach rowing. We're going to have a rowing team.
Well, there's a certain... Yes.
Who else has said yes to you? Yeah.
You seem like a reasonable guy.
Yeah.
You seem okay. But, tell me more about it. So that was a matter of, looking at who was involved, and Aubrey was there, and let's do it.
And it's incredible what that area has done too. I mean, you've got national, world events down there for rowing.
My father at that time, when we decided to pay for the boats that go, or one of the boats that goes up and down the river, and I'd gone up to Albany to look at the company that makes them with some city people to study that and see if that boat's going to work here. And there's an article in the newspaper. My father is old, can't get around very much, but he does avidly read the newspaper every day. And I go visit him, and he has the newspaper out in front of him and is looking at the picture of the boat in the river, and he's pointing at it. Tell me about this. And I start telling him, and I explain it, and he has this increasingly perplexed look on his face. And I talk more and more and more about it. I said, Dad, what's the matter? Larry, what river? And so I get his caregiver, and we get him into the car. He's not very agile, and I drive him downtown to show him the river. Because he's there, he knows there's no river in Oklahoma City. Yeah, he's lived here all his life. There's no river, and he has this look of, they sold. I'm too old to help. They sold my son, the London Bridge.
Right. Yeah, he's been duped. Yeah,
he's really been duped, and I'm too old to help him avoid this, and life is really terrible.
What? Yeah, I mean, what was his response to the tower as well? What was his reaction to the tower?
He died before that.
Oh, really? I'm sorry to hear that. That was to the tower. Then on that point, you'll be back to that. You said you went through a bunch of different designs. Do you have any models of the other designs that could have been somewhere?
I don't. We don't. The architects might.
That would have been something cool. I'm thinking of just all stuff in the background in your office. You were like, this is a 3D model of what the Devon Tower could have been. Just a little side thing, just something cool to have. Well, the other few questions I want to ask you is, during this whole story, during your time, is there one experience that really defined you, really shaped you into who you are?
No,
just a collective.
I mean, I think all of our growth is a series of small little experiences where we learn something. I've never had this is how life should be. Mm-hmm. No, you learn as you grow.
Yeah. Back when I asked you earlier, do you reward yourself? Do you struggle to reward yourself from your successes because there's always something next? There's always
something
goal.
Else to do.
There always is.
There always is.
But I think that's something that entrepreneurs struggle in general to do, especially successful ones, is it's sometimes a negative thing, and it goes against them because they're always looking to the next thing. They don't take time to sit back and enjoy that moment for a second and then go to the next one. Do you struggle with that as well?
No. I mean, maybe you do for a second, but the growing and making things happen is fun.
Yeah. Because the next question I was going to ask you, when was the last time you did reward yourself with a trip away with your wife, or a fancy car, or a watch, or, playing golf somewhere?
I've never rewarded myself in that sense. I love to travel.
Yeah.
And so I travel whenever I can.
Where'd you go recently?
Because of we had 3 international trips, 3 months in a row. No one would plan to do that.
Right.
But because of COVID, I'd committed and paid money for different things, and they all got postponed and delayed, and they ended up the last 3 months.
So you went back to back the last 3 months?
Went to Mongolia.
Wow.
Which I've never found anyone yet who's been there, but that was a great experience. A country surrounded by Russia and China, a struggling democracy. Which was very educational.
Yeah.
Educational more from a historical and political standpoint, learning about Genghis Khan and how you run a democracy surrounded by Russia and China is interesting. Went on a safari in West Africa, in East Africa, which I've done before and greatly enjoy.
Yeah.
With some friends, went on a cruise down the Danube River. Earlier in the year, went to a wedding in St. Lucia. That was not on the list, but a family member had a wedding, and okay.
Yeah, what a grace to have a wedding, a place to have a wedding.
I can fit that in.
Yeah. What's the rocks like in Mongolia?
Mongolia is a huge country.
Yeah.
It is the size of Alaska. So Mongolia we were in the city of Ulaanbaatar, and then out in the Gobi Desert, which from a geologic standpoint is an amazing, incredibly flat. I mean, it makes western Oklahoma with the Panhandle have terrain, because we do have rain out there. We have gullies, but incredibly flat.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting.
What are the places on the list that you haven't been to yet that you really want to go to?
I've got a family vacation over Christmas to Galapagos.
Oh, wow.
Planned that a long time ago, because to get 4 different grandkids with different school schedules and different in-laws and get everyone to agree to go for a 2-week trip took some work.
That's going to be a great experience.
I'm looking forward to it.
Right. And the beauty of it now is, like you said, you have the kids and the grandkids to experience everything with.
Oh, yeah.
And do any of them share your love for geology?
They're too young yet.
Yeah, okay. And your kids didn't growing up?
Or law or business.
Or business, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it difficult having, when you are growing a business and it's becoming successful and it's sort of the statement business in Oklahoma City, or one of those big businesses, is it difficult trying to not shelter your kids at that time? Giving them a, quote, normal upbringing, if that makes sense?
No, I don't think it's difficult. You just ignore that.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, and you see, especially today, and, I think the money situation is there's a lot more money available, and, you meet successful families and their kids turn out to be just a giant waste of space because they've been given everything. That's the tough part. It makes your job a lot harder. It's not easy being a parent, regardless of what your income level is. There
are parents who are very ostentatious and ostentatious with their kids.
Yeah.
I grew up mowing our grass every Saturday morning. My kids grew up living a real life.
Was Dad strict with the lines that you mowed? was he a detail-oriented guy with the lines, or did he just go cut the grass?
I wasn't very good at that. The first time I did that, I ruined 2 hoses, and I was going real fast, and I got a little careless, and I spent the rest of the summer digging myself out of a financial hole because I had to pay for those 2 new hoses.
Probably learned a lot of big life lesson there. Right?
More careful.
More careful, yeah.
And that is, you asked earlier about big decisions. Life is a series of learning experiences, and that's one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the statement that's on the website that I wrote down, which I absolutely loved, is innovations are heritage, achievements are future. And I love that because, you're constantly thinking of new ideas, but also the first thing that came to my mind was, you're going to fail. Just keep going, right? And you said it earlier, just show up. All you can do is show up, right? And keep going. And that's one thing in your story that you guys did, every day, and you didn't have time to think about other stuff. It was, what's next? Let's keep going. And, you look at the business today and the impact the business has had, not just on the families who are now moving here to work here, but also, the people you have all over the country that work for you. And, started from an idea, right, that Dad's like, hey, we got some outside investors. I think, can you come and work for me? Please give me 2 years to where we are today. It's incredible. And I know
it's been fun.
Yeah.
But it is. We all make mistakes. If you make a mistake, fix it and go on.
Yeah. What would be, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, all the people, young people coming out of college that are coming up to you asking you things. And, it's tough to give people advice in a 30-second interaction.
Find out what you like to do. We've had interns come in college, and I've always been equally happy. Occasionally you find an intern that says, I want to be a petroleum engineer, and they spend a summer with us or someone else, and decide, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go be a forester. I'm very happy with that. because you've helped a kid not spend a whole lot of time in college pursuing something that he doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
And if you don't like doing what you're doing, then fix it. I remember once reading a USA article, and it was on retirement. This is decades ago. Someone was saying, was quoted as saying, it's 6 years, 3 months, and 5 days before I retire. And I thought, good grief, what a miserable life. To be thinking about your date of retirement and it's conscious on your mind all the time, you're not enjoying what you're doing. Please quit and go find something else. Surely there's something you enjoy.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, there's all kinds of things a person can do, but find something you enjoy.
Yeah. Well, to that point then, what are you enjoying right now that's keeping you stimulated, mind-moving, excited for tomorrow?
I've enjoyed helping my wife get through her knee surgery, which is some skill sets that I didn't previously have. But on a city level, helping find replacements for some of the people that are retiring out in the business, doing that. Looking for opportunities to grow in urban renewal. I'm chairman of urban renewal, and some of the projects that are going on, Innovation District, have our imprint on them. Work in the Cowboy Museum, Nature Conservancy. There's lots of things.
We got some amazing things going on here, and it's so many different things, right? Like the things you just mentioned, none of them are the same. There's so much going on in this city that just you can't help but get fired up about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's exciting, and people need to. Obviously the replacement for the who's running the chamber, I forget her name, the new lady.
Kirsty Gillen.
That's right. Yes. She's got a great resume, and to bring someone like that to Oklahoma City says a lot about Oklahoma City itself.
Well, in fact, and in that job, this was really gratifying.
Yeah.
We talked to a variety of candidates, and several of the candidates told our headhunter, I'm not interested in leaving the city where I'm now head of the chamber. Don't call me for any other jobs. But if Oklahoma City is available, I'll talk about that. That happened in several of them who were emphatic with the headhunter, don't put me on your list. I'm really happy. I don't want any other job. But if you said Oklahoma City, I'll think about that one.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to how the city has performed relative to other cities. Mm-hmm. And it's a fun place to live and work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great place. And regardless if you like running, cycling, having food, drinking beer, going to football, basketball games, the arts, yeah,
they're all good.
It's hard to find a better place, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't have traffic issues here as well. It takes 20 minutes to get everywhere. It's amazing. I joke with that with my parents. Mom and dad would jump in the car when they came here. I'm like, where are we going? I said, it'll be 20 minutes. And after like 3 or 4 times, they just say, 20 minutes? Yeah, it's 20 minutes because it's just so easy to do. All right, final question. Who's your hero?
My hero. I'm not sure I have any heroes, but I sure have some people I admire.
Okay.
My father is one who taught me a huge amount. My mother taught me a huge amount. Different skill sets, different attitudes, both of them. But they're both my heroes. Of course, I love my wife and my family. In the business, it's probably Bill Rehnquist, Chief Justice Rehnquist, because working for him in a kind of a legal practice, managing a lot of different clients and powerful people in the White House and secretaries, and handling that with grace and humility. I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming out and spending some time with us to share your story. It's incredible. You've done so many great things for the city, but not just for the city. You've done great things for you and your family, and they're your number one, right? That's the pride of you and who you should be taking care of, and I'm sure they're extremely grateful. I'm sure Paulie's happy to have your help with the
most of the time
with a busted knee at the moment and a knee replacement, and I look forward to chatting with her. But Mr. Nichols, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and for people listening, we will catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you. Take care.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.